Okay, let's talk about what's in the package here. We have, well, it's a rollerball pen. It's Japanese. It's a little bit smoother. I like this because it feels more like you're just drawing with a pencil. So not like you're so committed to a line. It's not doesn't run too much. It's not like a very flowy type of ink. Just rolls off of there. Then next we have a marker, and that's just for tone. Something in the mid values, a little bit cooler, but just darker than the tone paper. Then we have a white pencil. Of course, this is for the highlights. And lastly, Persian blue, but this is not part of the tone sketching. This is more for like just a white piece of paper. And that's it. We'll be thinking about three tones: a highlight, um, marker for mid value, and just the line construction, the line work. All right, and then let's get started. Um, Remember, we're going to think about this as three tones, or three values, really. We'll look at a shadow side, light side, or area that the light's casted on, and just the construction. I guess the line work. You can see these two characters in the center of my sketchbook. We have kind of two ranges that we're kind of playing with. Think of it like the histogram in Photoshop, where you have in this guy maybe 5%, 7% is the highlight, and that's going to be the specular of the picture. Whereas on the girl character, well, we've got a little bit more light and less shadow. So a little bit more poppy, more on the light side. It depends on the effect you want. The paper is going to be, of course, our midtones. It's going to keep us kind of in the more relaxed, where the information is going to be. So it actually saves us a lot of work. We could create volume quickly this way by just defining shadow shapes that carries the form. And then the highlight itself is just to pull it off the page. Right here you see a method of dry brush, a little bit faster, quicker, it starts to run off a little, but it doesn't fully saturate the page. You see it just describing some of the folds a little bit more than the other character here. See, the other character here is just mostly cast shadows, a few on the wrinkles. The highlights on this guy too is really just the areas that are going to be more rim. Let's see if we could find something else. Well, here is a gesture drawing that's just accentuated by just two tones as well. So you see this is really quick, light, not much to it, just a few construction lines, but not much. Not much is holding up this drawing other than shapes and pulling out a light side and a shadow side. So really it's our thought process of defining these shapes here. And of course, overall, art, you need to understand the subject that you're creating. So the knowledge of anatomy is obviously needed if you could do figure drawing, but it could work for whatever you're drawing. Just know what it is you're trying to represent. Here I'm trying to, I use a little arrow here, and this to remind us of which direction light's falling on the object. Just a little reminder, I don't know if you can see that. We'll bring that up again later. We see a lot of these areas that we're describing with a little bit of highlight, making it pop away from the page. Remember, it's creating this contrast between falling back into the page with shadow shapes and highlights to pick out details. You can see that we're on the eyes. This is something else in photography we do is catch light. A little twinkle in the eye helps us connect with characters. And let's see if maybe we could find one other example here. Now, this one, for example, this one's a little bit more defined, more finished, but you can see the range of where the values are. And there's, of course, a lot of it is already held together with line, a lot more line work on this one, but the shadow side is heavily held up by the shapes. A lot more towards the shadow area. This is to accentuate something that's already defined more. And that's about it. Let's get started in the next video. All right, now we're back. We're going to just start with something pretty simple. Maybe, probably just a head or something like that. Let's just work something out really loosely, quickly, and then we'll start bringing out the image. And I'm just using the pen that's in there. Like I said, it's much like the characteristics of a pencil. So let's see what we could get here. This is just some construction lines. We're just trying to find out some of the proportions of where the face is going to lay, what parts are going to lay where. No line is going to be perfect the first time. You got to be forgiving of yourself, right? We always have to be able to make the mistakes and just find the lines as we go. Find the areas that we want to make pop and bring out more detail, like maybe in this nose. A little bit of the mouth shape after I've gotten some stuff in its place. And just quickly just represent, some of these areas. Like these eyes are just the basic shape and maybe not even closed loop around the lids. Just kind of circle for eyes, just real quick. Kind of building maybe the brow ridge a little bit, just for expression's sake. Again, I'm just redefining some of these lines here as I go. You look at the first lines versus where, finding where maybe the jawline is, maybe a little detail on some elements like this air. These little details kind of ground the image. The more information you put in some areas, that's where people's eyes are going to linger a little bit longer. So, people have a tendency to hold on to areas of interest in the face, especially when you look at people talking. And just darkening the eyes a little bit more here. Next, we're gonna probably start thinking about the hair, what that's gonna look like. Oh, let's put an arrow here. This is gonna remind us of where light's gonna fall onto objects in space. This is gonna be very helpful later on. Now let's start thinking about the hair, how it's gonna be one shape, right? We're gonna think of the hair more like something draping over a ball. So we're treating it like cloth or something like a single shape rather than individual strands. We'll think of the strands more like the texture of the object. A few of them could stray off, but in general, let's just keep it in shapes. Simple. Just working on how it flows and curls off. And then we might find a few strands that we want to bring out those lines a little bit more permanently. That's why I like this pen here. It works like a pencil where you could just loosely and lightly sketch something in and then start finding out what lines you want to keep, what shapes are working for you. Find the neckline. And that's probably very close to where we want to be. Just finding out some suggestive shapes here for when we do the marker. Thinking ahead a little. It's going to help us visualize those marker shapes. And that's it. I think maybe define the teeth a little bit more. And just get that shape a little bit more defined. Some areas, yeah, I'm sure we'll go back to it eventually too. And that should get you mostly there, just to lay out the groundwork. All right, now we're back. Here we're going to start the shadowing. Just finding out those dark areas, the shadow side of things, keeping it divided between where light hits and transition to the shapes of what the shadow side is going to be. And this, remember, our arrow here is going to remind us where light, what light direction is coming from. It's going to help us a lot here. And what we do is just start finding out the shapes over here, just kind of doing the cast shadows off of our objects, like the hair strands. We're accentuating some of these areas that our lines already suggest. Maybe the air, it's going to drop off. The easy one is the head. It's going to cast a shadow onto the neck. And we just create a shape over here. And you can use both sides depending on the comfort level of your control. Using some of that broad side there. Now I'm just going to wisp a little bit at the hair and use some of the detail that we laid in there. Just find those edges, find those strands, adjust a few, and some of it's going to just lay in that whole mid area and the tone of the paper, the default. Then I'm just going to start finding actual edges, strands, and I'm just going to draw it out with the marker. And then now we start seeing the hairs starting to separate from the light side, her right area. Start doing more cast shadows. So the nose, of course, is popping out at you, and then the upper lip. Obviously, that plane is towards away from the light. And now I'm just gonna start doing some of the form shadows. The obvious ones are just going to be the brow ridge to the eyes, because that's a fall off point. Maybe a little bit underneath the eyes, because eyeballs are a sphere and punches out a bit. And of course we got the hair. I'm going to pop that head out a little with that contrast. See how we're just pulling out some of the image, some of the form from her head. And now let's think about maybe, well, where this shadow's coming through. See, I'm contemplating whether or not to add shadow on that side, how strong to make that fall off to be. But I think this marker is maybe a little bit too dark to start making that curve on her cheek. I could do a little bit more on the hair. Make this double curve right here on her hairline. And that's mostly it for describing it. All right, last but not least, the highlights. Of course, this is the last and final step to it, but is also could be the quickest, more enjoyable. But let's first review about what our approach was here. We just created some construction lines, found the shadow side, and now we're just going to make the highlights pop. Now remember, this is tone sketching, so the paper is going to cover a lot of that mid-tone. To think back to when we were talking about Photoshop or histogram, the highlights are like that 5% to 7% to make things pop on and maybe accentuate areas that you want to have the viewer affix on, like eyes, for instance. That's something very common in photos. So we're going to use it a little sparingly. Remember, we have our little arrow to kind of remind us where that light's going to be. So that's going to guide us a bit. So we're just going to go and start finding some of these edges. Remember this arrow, and which way is going to fall on first. Maybe something obvious is going to be the nose. So we're just going to make that pop by giving it a little strong highlight there. We'd be pretty safe that the closest thing towards the camera is going to pop out more, especially if the light's coming from behind us a bit. Now I'm just going to start finding some of that rim light, maybe off over here. Now remember, the hair is treated like one object. However, the strands are like the textures. So the more and tighter strand type of strokes you put, the brighter it's going to look. You're describing the form more. And of course, the more space, it's going to be less intense. We see already the form is starting to pull out from the tone of the paper. Now it's going to be about picking out a few little areas. Be consistent, right? That's what that arrow is going to do. It's going to keep us reminded of the direction. We easily pick out those eyes, like I said. Those are usually catch lights in photography. Also going to go back to the pen a little bit and darken up some of the pupils to really make that thing pop. Make that contrast in their eyes. Go ahead and start putting and defining some of those lids a little bit more, kind of like mascara. That's another way you can look at this too. It's that we're kind of putting a layer of editing, a little bit of makeup on there, that deciding what areas you want to have accentuated, stand out. I should probably go back to the marker here. I saw like the air is maybe a little bit too light for where it is on her face. Even though we didn't make that curve, we didn't describe that one around the cheek. I feel the air was maybe too light. Now I'm going to start pulling out some of maybe where the specular might be. Maybe it's not as bright as a highlight. So we're just kind of starting to render out some of the form, the fall off of the light. So obviously the forehead's closer to the light direction. Finding those planes, maybe the top of the cheek. And then maybe start rounding off that nose bridge, defining it out a little bit more. Pulling out the other side. And then giving a little shine on the lips. A little bit on the chin. Just pull that out a little. Maybe go back and you could even make some areas a little bit brighter. It's all about balancing. Just gonna render out a little bit of the hair. See, that's starting to pop out, having form, and that's really simple from just 3 little tools. Now remember, there's not really any rules here, so if you look at this drawing right here, right next to it, you don't have to go to the shadow side first. You can actually define the light side, or the light side that's going to be past the default of the page. I'm just going to bring out some of the highlights. It's a little bit different way of thinking, but we're going to take the same direction of light, apply it to this image here. Start pulling out the form. Remember how hair is, works with strands as texture. Start defining some of the cheeks. Just the cheekbone there. The side of the head. Maybe some of the nose bridge. We get up here to the lips. We're starting to pull it out before receding into the page. So this is just a different way of thinking and approaching the same 3 tools, same kind of idea though, with the 3 values. Here you can see I'm just pulling out some form from the page. I mean, maybe this is as far as you want to take it, so that you're just popping out highlights and letting maybe just the line work speak for itself. But you go back in there and try to find a little bit of shadow shape. A lot of it's kind of defined in the drawing already. It's all about pulling out those forms again, making some of it recede further back. More the strands of the hair, making the face frame pop. Remember the neck. Pop out the nose a little bit cast shadow on there. Maybe the right there, the lip, and a little bit of the eyes, just to recede that shape. And that's it. Look at the two different approaches, same thought process. And well, and that's it. Have fun.